What's up, Bougie Bosses? It's your girl, Kayla Simmons, and today we're going to be talking about when to expand your brand. And we're going to be expounding on this topic in a few different ways from a few different perspectives, all right? So just stay tuned. I just want to preface this video by saying that the views that I'm expressing here are that of my own. I understand that other entrepreneurs may have different views or opposing views, but they have different experiences. And so I'm just sharing what I know and what I recommend based on what works for me and my experience thus far. So just, take what I say with a grain of salt. You guys know that I started off the Melanin Perspective as a blog. I launched last July, first thought of it last February. And so with that being said, it took about a year to a year and a half, if you want to, take it back to when I first started working on the brand, before I branched out into another big platform like YouTube. And I did that because I wanted to make sure that I would be able to juggle all of what comes with having a blog and promoting the blog. My blog is very detailed. It's very specific, and it has 5 different sectors, technically 3 if you want to group the self-development aspect with the mental health, emotional intelligence, and physical well-being, but it's still 5 different categories if you also include my Melanin Bougie Boss highlights, formerly known as Melanin Boss Babe highlights, and my Bougie Boss must have sector. So I wanted to make sure that I would be able to juggle all of that, as well as keeping up with the logistics and also the social media. I wanted to make sure that I would be consistent in all of that and be able to produce great content in a timely manner. You know what I mean? I didn't want to start something and then have it be half done, because that just makes your brand look a lot less credible. So, and plus at the time when I started, it was right before my senior year. I had multiple jobs. I had school, of course. I had multiple organizations and just other regular life things. So I wanted to make sure that I'd be good. So that's why I just held off. And another reason why I held off is because, I'm a self-development brand. And for me personally, in my opinion, I just feel like self-development brands, you shouldn't really start off selling products or services in the beginning, just because it's an emotion-based industry, which means that connecting with your audience in an authentic way, connecting with your audience/target market, is vitally important for high conversion rates. You know what I mean? I remember seeing this Gary Vee analogy that Vanessa Lau shared in one of her videos on her channel, where she said Gary Vee gave this analogy kind of like a boxing combination, and it was just like a jab, 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 hook, which basically means that you give so much free information that is valuable to the point to where when you finally do say, hey guys, I'm selling this product, I'm selling this service, that it's a no-brainer for your audience to buy it, because in their minds it's just like, wow, well, they gave us so much valuable information for free that I know that whatever they're selling has to be even more valuable, and they took the time to get to know me first and build a connection with me first. So it just makes things better all around. And that's something that an ideology that I share, because even before, if you go back to my storytelling video, I briefly mentioned how God had given me the vision of not a self-development brand, but just a brand that catered to Black women in general. And I didn't know what all that would entail then, but I knew the specific sectors that I wanted to hit. One of them actually wasn't self-development at the time. That didn't come until the following February, but I know what different sectors I wanted to hit on. And so even though I knew that back in 2018, and I knew that when I thought in 2019 of TMP and I came up with it, I knew that it would be something that I would venture out into later on. However, I decided to wait because of timing. It just wasn't the right time, even though I knew that I wanted to branch out into other sectors, and I still plan on doing that. Everything is all in good timing. And so that's why I was intentional about waiting before I even started selling stuff. Honestly, I'm not even really selling anything now. The only time I've sold stuff is when I sold my t-shirts at a speaking engagement. But even that, I'm holding off to really start pushing my products and services until later next year, or early next year rather, because I wanted to be intentional about doing that. And so, I mean, of course, there are some self-development brands that can get away with starting off selling things, but I think it just comes across more genuine when you just try to build a connection with them first before you go start shoving products and services down their throat. Because I mean, it's self-development. You need to pull up their heartstrings first before you start digging in their wallets. You know what I'm saying? So that's just how I feel about it. That's just my view. I also wanted to branch out, and come from another perspective and also talk about not just expanding in terms of what you offer as far as products, services, or information, but also expanding to other platforms. The only thing worse than an entrepreneur with no social media platforms is an entrepreneur with two social media platforms. I can't stress this enough. We see this all the time where people just spread themselves to then trying to be any and everywhere. And honestly, every platform is not for every brand. You don't have to be on every single site. No matter what articles tell you, you should just start small and then branch out from there. I know I just started with Instagram and Facebook. I mean, I do recommend starting with those two at least, because those are kind of just like the main heavy hitters, for me, in my opinion at least. But as far as like getting on Pinterest or LinkedIn or TikTok and all that, you know what I'm saying? Just pace yourself, because social media is a beast all on its own, and you do not want to be one of the ones that start it and then you can't keep up because it's just too much content to be putting out. And so people go to your page because they may like a post they saw on the explore page, and the last post you had was from like 4 months ago. You don't want to be one of those brands, right? And so definitely wait until the right time. Wait until you're sure that you can properly put out content and push out social media content, because there is a science to it, and you really need to be consistent. And when you launch these things, there's nothing worse than a brand starting something that they don't finish. That really just knocks at their credibility, and you do not want that to be you. So just make sure that you can handle what you're already doing before you bring something on. And of course, there's always the option of hiring people if you don't have the time, but I didn't really elaborate on that because most people watching this probably can't afford to hire a social media person. So just, if it's just you in the beginning, like it is for most of us, then just pace yourself and make sure that you can be consistent, basically. I'm going to be putting out a video next week actually talking about social media tips and elaborating a little bit more on this and on what's worked for me. But I just wanted to include that in there just to make sure that it's the right time and that you can be able to keep up with putting out social media, because you're going to be competing with a lot of other brands in the same industry who are consistent. And so if you're not, you're just going to get lost in the crowd. So that's just a recommendation for that. I also wanted to briefly touch on the more traditional B2C or B2B companies. I thought of an example to give, and one that I thought of in terms of what we were talking about before, or as far as when you should or shouldn't expand in terms of products, services, or information. I wouldn't recommend adding more products or services to your roster if you don't have a website. That's an example that I can think of, because convenience is key. And I'm sure you already have enough time, having to walk every single customer through a transaction in the DM or in the email, you know what I'm saying? So that's already time consuming enough as it is. Just imagine how much more time consuming it would be if you added more offers with no host where they can access it themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like I said before, you're probably doing this by yourself, which means you're wearing a million different hats, have a million different things to do. You do not have time to walk every single customer through a transaction. And I know from the consumer standpoint, I like to, be on my phone while I'm scrolling on Amazon or something like that. I like to go back and forth between two products 20 different times. Most times I don't even end up buying either one, but that's a whole other story. But you know what I mean? That's the whole attractiveness about online shopping is that you get to go at your own pace. And you can't do that if you're waiting on somebody to reply back to you and y'all are going back and forth. We know that people are not patient, especially when it comes to spending their money. And so the more that someone has to wait, the more likely they are to follow through or to not follow through on the purchase. So I would take that with a grain of salt. That would be a recommendation that I have. I know, you may not have the website of your dreams, and you may not be able to afford a web developer, but there's a lot of resources out there